Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's great to have you all here in a packed house, and of course, the President Jakov Milatović, great to have you with us. Thank you for your time. We are meeting here at a very crucial period for the world, for Europe, but also, of course, for Montenegro. Let's start by tackling perhaps the most pressing and most obvious issue pertaining to the future of your country, namely Montenegro's path to the EU. Your country has submitted EU membership application in 2008 and was granted candidate status in 2010. Negotiations started subsequently 2 years later, and Montenegro is now advancing toward EU membership, aiming to become the 28th member state by 2028. Mr. President, where do you see the process today? And perhaps more importantly, what are, from your perspective, the biggest remaining hurdles to full EU accession?
Well, thank you very much for the question. And I just came last night from a big event, the summit of the European Political Community in Copenhagen, and I took the opportunity to ask all the leaders from the European Union to start drafting the accession treaty for Montenegro. I believe that it is the right time, it is a due time, and that was my message, because I do believe that this would basically be a very strong signal also from the side of the EU that Montenegro is entering really the final stage of the process. Whenever I'm being asked about Montenegro being a front runner, I always answer that I believe that everybody is a bit tired of front running. We do want to come to end of the race, and I believe that to answer your question directly, it is the fact that we are now entering the final stage. Obviously, the final stage is also the most difficult one. You know that Montenegro is the only out of 10 candidate countries that has opened all the chapters. There are 33 when it comes to Montenegro, and so far we have closed 7. I believe that by the end of the year we are expected to close a few more. Now, whether that's going to be 5, 6, or 7, it doesn't really matter that much. The big picture is that we should be able to close all the chapters within the next 2 years, with the big aim, which is an ambitious goal, to become the 28th member state of the EU by 2028. And I believe that it was myself, immediately after the presidential elections, who came up first with this sentence. It was basically a pitch, which I believe is a very symbolic in terms of becoming the 28th member state by 2028. It's an easy sentence, for the President Macron to remember it, or the German Chancellor, and that's the target now. I believe that, especially given the geopolitics and a bit a new wave of energy that we are definitely seeing in Brussels, also in the other European capitals when it comes to enlargement, the ball is definitely in the yard of Montenegro. So it is now up to us to intensify the final steps, to intensify the reform agenda, and to come to an end of the running process.
Yeah, absolutely. The ball is very much in our court, you say, and that is something that the EU, what I would say, would fully back up. They are, of course, insisting and keep emphasizing that candidate countries must demonstrate progress in reforms, the rule of law, human rights, anti-corruption measures, and media freedom. How do you think you're faring on those issues? You've talked about some outstanding chapters that are still to be tackled. What concrete reforms is your country prioritizing, particularly perhaps with regards to the rule of law and judiciary independence?
Well, as you know, that especially according to the new methodology that has been adopted and accepted by everybody, also in the EU as well as in the candidate countries, without major progress in the rule of law, you cannot advance on the chapters that are a bit more technical. So this is why the last year in Montenegro the buzzword was the so-called IBAR, which is interim benchmarks related to the rule of law. It was assessed that the country has made inadequate progress in the rule of law, and this is last year what enabled us to basically make the progress in the other chapters. I believe that the biggest hurdle that the country was having when it comes to the rule of law is institutional consolidation of the judiciary institutions. As you remember, as the audience could also recall, that the country wasn't able to make a political decision in the parliament for some time when it comes to the appointments of the highest officials of the judiciary, including the head of the Supreme Court, the head of the state prosecution, and this is what indeed happened last year in Montenegro. And I believe this is really what I do want to say, that it was not only because of the parliamentary position, but also because of the constructive role of part of the opposition, that there was an adequate consensus in the parliament, the majority which was needed, which was needed for those appointments. And this is what really was the major step ahead when it comes to the institutional consolidation of some of the most important judiciary institutions in the country. And that was really a major step forward, as it was assessed also by our European partners. I think that together with a number of other laws that have been adopted in the parliament, this is really what enabled the country to progress. As you may know, the country last year was able to continue closing the chapters. We have closed 4 of them. I was saying that it wasn't enough because I believe that the pace should have been quicker, faster, and it was probably because of the energy of the society, especially because of actions of different political actors, was moved to certain other areas rather than really finalizing the EU integration part of the country. This is why I always call and ask all the political actors in the country. It's obviously that responsibility is always bigger for those who are having the power rather than those who are in the opposition, to really focus its full focus and energy on the EU accession agenda of the country. And that basically means on the reform agenda of the country, because one thing which I believe is very important, the EU accession is this great external anchor that we as a country have. So it's not really that the EU is the goal on its own. The EU is an instrument. The EU accession is an instrument. It's how I call it. It's an anchor which is reminding us all and pushing us always forward on the reform agenda. And this is how I see the process. Ultimately, we don't do it, because of the EU. We do it, for the sake of our own citizens, for the quality of life of the people of Montenegro, rule of law, our institutions, and the economic convergence with the rest of the EU, so that we stop a very negative demographic trend of our own population that perhaps we can also talk about.
Yes, most certainly. Listening to you here today, it's very clear that you are very passionate and very convinced about this progress, European progress that your country is on.
I'm very passionate, and by the way, when sometimes when my wife asks me, there are difficult days when you are the president or the prime minister, I guess. And when my wife asked me, okay, why are we doing this? Because it's not always easy to be under the attention of the public the whole time. I always answer to myself, first of all, that really the mission of my political life, the way I see it, is to bring the country into the EU. And when I say that, I do believe, to basically, at least be this, at least small part of a bigger process, which is ultimately a reform process. And this is what keeps me in the job, in a sense.
So it's very good to know that the passion you're displaying here, you're also displaying at home when you're talking to your wife about EU accession talks. But that's always good to know, of course. But your passion is certainly not in question here, quite on the contrary. But would you say that the current government in Montenegro is fully aligned with European values? Is the current government fully behind becoming the 28th member state of the European Union by 2028?
I think that the wording is right, but very often the actions that follow are not fully aligned with the wording that the parliamentary majority, those who are having the power in the parliament and the government are speaking about. So this is why I always say that the actions should be more aligned with the wording which exists. And sometimes I even wonder what our politicians, what our political, subjects, will be speaking about the day after we enter the EU, because it's constantly that the EU accession is a buzzword, and nobody is speaking really about the reforms. This is what I do want once again to remind us all. The EU accession is not the goal on its own. When I speak about my mission, when I speak about the EU itself, I always speak about the reforms. The reforms when it comes to the economic convergence, the reforms when it comes to the rule of law, the reforms of our public administration, institutions, etc., etc. This is where I would want to see more actions. Let me give you an example. This country still doesn't have a functional constitutional court. This country still doesn't have a law on government. This country still doesn't have a law on parliament. This country, especially the actions that we are seeing, still has a government and the parliamentary majority which is really keen to control institutions. They are very, often unhappy with what I say, because they do want to control also the president. They do want to control, the media sector. They do want to control our central bank. They do want to control, different, police, army. So there is the modus operandi of the current government is very similar of the modus operandi of the former regime. There is always a need to control the institutions that on paper and de facto should be independent, because that's the only way that we progress forward. And this is what I believe is very unfortunate.
Yeah, certainly. I can sense a certain disappointment, to put it mildly and diplomatically, perhaps, that not everybody is fully aligned with the process for now. Still some work ahead, of course, for you. That is for certain. Some say there's enlargement fatigue in Brussels, and that is slowing the process. But at the same time, you've also said here today that you yourself, you're getting tired of being called a front runner. It would be good to actually see some concrete actions and steps forward. Now, how do you maintain momentum and full public support here in your own country, despite this uncertainty? I've read somewhere that in 13 years of negotiations, support for your membership here in Montenegro has never fallen below 70%. If that is correct, that's quite impressive, considering how long the process has already taken.
Well, absolutely, and I think that this is the fact that we should all cherish very much, because as you know, this is not really the case in many other countries of the neighborhood. This is why I ultimately always remind all the political subjects, to focus on the EU accession, because this is ultimately what is the expectation of our citizens. But just to remind you, and this is what I said yesterday to the politicians, about 50 leaders from, from the European continent that gathered yesterday in Copenhagen, and especially to those leaders of the EU member states. And I do want to repeat it here also in front of your audience. When you really zoom out a bit, the EU accession was never really only a gift to a candidate country, but it was a visionary decision of the politicians and the political leaders of Europe to invest in the stability and prosperity of the European continent. Let me give you an example. So in the 70s and 80s, when it was about the accession of southern European countries like Spain, Portugal, Greece, it wasn't really because those countries back then were really ready for the EU. They were not. It was the time when, when those three countries exited from a very difficult period of dictatorship in those countries. But it was a decision of the EU leaders to invest in stability and prosperity of Southern Europe. The same happened in 2000s when there was a second big wave, which was the one related to Central and Eastern Europe. Immediately after the fall of the Berlin Wall and immediately after those countries exited from a communist past. It wasn't really that many of them were ready, but once again, it was a decision of the EU leaders to invest in stability and prosperity, not only of Central and Eastern Europe, but of the whole European continent. And this is what I also reminded yesterday the EU leaders. You're never ready in a sense, because it's the EU accession is a target which is constantly changing. So from the perspective of the EU, accession of the Western Balkans, accession of Ukraine, accession of Moldova is more about those countries. It's also about security, prosperity, and stability of the European continent.
Yeah, at the end of the day, as you say, it's you have to jump into the cold water at some point to see whether you can swim
Absolutely.
or not. Yeah.
And, related to that, where I see the role of Montenegro. Montenegro is the smallest by far out of 10 candidate countries. And we are not biggest country in terms of the population or, in terms of the economy. We can't really change our neighborhoods. But what we can do, we can be a role model. We are already a role model in many aspects, but also we can be a role model in terms of the accession, where the accession of Montenegro in the EU could be a story bigger than Montenegro, because in this way, the EU, would also be able to show to those other countries that reforms pay off, that the new political culture, the one which I'm representing here today, is being paid off. And this is how I see Montenegro. I see Montenegro as a genuine role model in many regards. And when I say that I'm disappointed sometimes, I'm very disappointed, because I believe that we are not using the opportunity, which is there to be in all different ways a role model to its potential.
And the potential is, of course, something that everybody's in Europe is at some point looking forward to absorbing and having 2028, perhaps a bit later, but the goal is very clear. And it's also very timely because, of course, the last country to join the EU was Croatia, and that was back in 2013. But the EU, of course, has been making a renewed push to bring in new members, such as Montenegro, since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Which brings me to my next question, and an international organization that Montenegro is already part of. You are trying to become a member of the EU, but you are, of course, already a full member of NATO since 2017. And Russia's war against Ukraine has forced Europe really to reconsider its security architecture. As a NATO member, how has that war impacted and influenced your country and you as a leader?
So once again, to zoom out a bit, I think that my mind is also the one of analysis. So when Russia decided to attack Ukraine, which did not happen for the first time in 2022, but it happened in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea, the result of it basically was enlargement of NATO towards the two Balkan countries. One was this country here, Montenegro, and the second one was North Macedonia. Then the next time when Russia continued its war against Ukraine in 2022 with the attack on the east of the country, the result of it was enlargement of NATO once again in Finland and in Sweden. And I think that as unfortunately, as a result of unfortunately for Ukraine, obviously, but as a result of this Russian war against Ukraine, the positive thing was that NATO became even stronger and more united. Our position on this war was at least my position. I can speak only in my name. Was very clear. Although I believe that all the governments have followed the same line. Was the support of Ukraine from the very day one. You know that there is a very complex discussion also within the NATO. Now there is a bit of a different approach, especially given the change in the White House. How to sort of approach the whole situation. This is something that was heard yesterday in Copenhagen.
And President Trump, of course, he is forcing European countries such as yours that are members of NATO to step up, to increase their defense spending. Used to be 2%, now they raised the bar to 5%. Is Montenegro meeting those goals?
Well, I think this is Trump's policy when it comes to increase of the spending. Was also his flagship policy during his first mandate. Naturally, it continued now during his second mandate. And as you all know, we have decided to increase direct military spending to 3.5% of GDP. On top of that, there is an extra 1.5% of GDP that is sort of a wider security-related spending, which should make all the countries more resilient in different ways. Montenegro is currently at about 2%, and we have made a commitment to follow. What I do want to emphasize here is that when you actually compare the military expenses of Montenegro in comparison to some of the countries in the neighborhood that are currently following neutral security and foreign policy, they're actually paying more than what we are currently paying. And to repeat again, I believe that being a member of NATO is by far the most efficient way for country to have a very strong security umbrella, on top of the other things that are obviously politically and economically related. So I do believe that Montenegro has proven and shown that we are a credible NATO member, committed to all the decisions that ultimately we all together make.
So clearly Montenegro is a very valued NATO member since 2017, will hopefully become an EU member by 2028. You just came back from New York, where you addressed the 80th session of the General Assembly at the UN, and you made a very strong case. I listened to the speech. You made a very strong case, not just for the UN, but also for multilateralism. At a time when really it's not really trending, is it? We do see increased nationalism. We see a lot of countries going it alone. We see frictions. That must give you grave cause for concern.
Well, General Assembly this year was also quite interesting. It came, in a time when we as a world are celebrating 80 years, so 8 decades since the establishment of this great organization of ours. And it is a very unique one because, that's the only platform and only organization in the world which consists of all the countries where each of one, despite the fact of its size, has one voice. I'm a devoted, in the same way as I'm passionate about the EU accession of the country, I'm, in the same way passionate about, multilateralism and the world order, which is rule-based world order. Unfortunately, what was obvious is that the new American administration perhaps has a bit of a question mark when it comes to the efficiency of the UN organization. Perhaps it is a legitimate question to answer. And, as a result of that, as you may all know, the UN Secretary General has launched a big initiative, which is the one to reform the UN system. It is, a topic that has been open. It is a topic to create a UN system which should be even more efficient and more effective, to all the challenges that the world is facing not only today, but also that the world will be facing in the future. But one thing that I do want to say here, we should not be blaming the UN for the actions of the member states that are, not all the time fully in line with the UN Charter. So yes, UN is the one who, is promoting and advocating for everything which we all have agreed to be part of the UN Charter, but we cannot blame the UN for the actions of the member states that are, as you can see throughout the world, very often not in line and not fully in line with the words of the UN Charter.
It is, of course, just
so
a mirror.
It is all of us, to blame. In order for the UN to be better, every single member state should probably, behave more towards what has been written in the UN Charter.
In an ideal world, indeed, it's very clear you believe in multilateralism, you believe in cooperation. May other countries follow suit, particularly also in this region.
But can you imagine the world without the UN? Can anybody here, whenever you ask a question about, how efficient something is, ask yourself a question, about the world where we don't have UNICEF, or where we don't have UNDP, where we don't have World Health Organization, where we don't have, some of the standards related to the air traffic, etc., etc. What would our world look like without the UN? I genuinely believe it would be a world where we all would be worse off than what we are now. This is not the perfect thing, but we need all to work together to make it better, and I believe the only way to make it better is through UN.
Well, I tell you what, the UN is looking for a new Secretary General, I believe, next year.
Well,
So after having listened to this speech here, you have my vote for what it's worth. Though I think they're looking for a woman this time, so may not pan out altogether. But you would be, once again, to use one of your favorite words, you would be a front runner, at least if I have anything to say, which I rarely do. But Mr. President, we're almost out of time, but I do want to quickly come to just a couple of things to wrap up. Obviously, you talked about cooperation. Cooperation is something to be desired. Also in this region, of course, the Western Balkans is never a boring minute in this region. There's Donald Trump says, make America great again. Perhaps we should make the Balkans, Western Balkans, boring again. It is, of course, a very challenging region, and you're president in this challenging region. You're also, you represent also a very young generation of leaders here in this region. You're 38 years old. youngest person to ever hold the office of president in this country, and if I'm not mistaken, the world's 6th youngest serving state leader. If you are meeting with your counterparts in Denmark, in New York, all around the world, probably who are considerably much older, what distinguishes you from them? How does your youth play into your leadership style?
Well, perhaps, one thing that I have noticed is that in comparison to many of them, I'm still, and maybe I hope to stay like that. I'm an idealist, and
that's very clear from this talk today.
And I think that it is obviously. I believe it's genuinely good to be an idealist because otherwise you lack the energy to push. To change the things that are needed to be changed.
So more young people in power, is that what you're pleading?
Well, it's natural that I fight for the young, and this is why a few weeks ago I have also for the first time in Montenegro have created the youth council, which is now in charge of advising me as a president. I must say that when I saw the CVs of about 20 people that I now have in the Youth Council of the President, I do want to say to everybody here that I feel very optimistic about the future of this country as well.
Well, my goal to end on an optimistic note has therefore been reached. So I'm very happy that we managed to end on an optimistic note at times that are anything but. But I think it's become abundantly clear here throughout the last 30 minutes. Still a lot of work ahead for Montenegro, for Europe. But if your passion is any guidance and any indication, I think we can look optimistically into Europe's and certainly Montenegro's future. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of Montenegro, Jakov Milatović. Thank you so much.
Thank you.